welcome to Beyond Words, a novel idea. I am your sound and audio engineer, Logan, and I am joined by our host, Colleen, as well as our co-host, Paul. Today we're going to be talking to Paul, who is a retired lieutenant colonel in the Army. He also has 20 plus years writing novels, as well as a 20 plus year career working and writing for film and TV. And now I'm going to let Colleen take the stage.
All right, hi, and welcome everyone to A Novel Idea. We are talking to Paul, who has 23 books, I think, now unpublished. He's been writing since 1989. That's how old he is. So we are going to start today off with how to start your writing project. You know, where do you start? How do you find the characters? Where do your ideas come from? You and I talk about this all the time. Like, people think we're crazy, which is probably not far off when it comes to being a writer. I know when I'm writing, I spend a lot of time talking to myself, and you know, my husband and kids are always like, "What? I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to my character." And you know, I'm constantly making notes in my phone, waking up like you do in the middle of the night and writing down ideas. Oh, I have this great idea. Oh my God, I'm insane. So, Paul, where do you get started? How do you get started in your novels? Where do you start?
Well, every writing project, novels, screenplays, short stories, everything starts with this little nucleus of a germ called an idea. And ideas are everywhere. I get a lot of my ideas at 3 o'clock in the morning when these strange visions wake me up. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. I have a notebook beside the bed, and sometimes I'll write down what I was thinking about or what woke me up, and it's a germ of an idea. A lot of times I get an idea when I'm taking a shower. It seems I relax in the shower. The hot water just relaxes everything, relaxes your muscles.
Yeah, but how do you take notes? How do you take notes if you're in the shower? I mean, you know, are you yelling to your phone? You're like, "Hey, take this note for me." Because are you like, you know, you get up and you're like, "Oh my God, this is a great idea," and like 3 seconds later you forgot it, right?
Well, obviously I don't take notes in the shower, but when I get out of the shower, if I can remember them, I'll write them down. Sometimes it's difficult for me to remember them, but I'll write them down. But seriously, folks, sometimes these ideas will not translate into anything close to a novel. It may be a snippet of dialogue that I thought about, or something I can use for a scene in a larger project, which will in fact turn out to be a novel. So just because it's an idea doesn't mean that I can turn it into a novel.
All right, now you've got the idea and you want to develop that idea. And you have decided that this idea is perfect for a book, which is what we're talking about today. We're talking about writing for books and novels. You've got this idea. Okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to beat out 5,000 words or however many words you do every day when you sit down. How do you go about doing that?
There are two types of writers. There are plotters and plotters. Plotters, P-L-O-D-D-E-R-S, and plotters, P-L-O-T-T-E-R-S. I'm a plotter with the D's, P-L-O-D-D-E-R-S. That's how I write. But a plotter with the T's plots everything out. They will sit down and decide that this book is going to take me from Seattle to Miami. And my first plot point is going to be when I travel from Seattle to Spokane. And then I'm going to go to Missoula, Montana. And then I'm going to go down to St. Louis, and then back up to Chicago, and then New York, and then to Charlotte, and then Atlanta, and down to Miami. Where I, as a plotter with the D's, sit down and say, okay, I'm going to go from Seattle to Miami. I wonder how I'm going to get there.
And your editor, is it your editor or your publicist has a word for what you do?
My manager.
Oh, your manager.
Yeah, my manager calls it stream of unconsciousness. It's just basically a brain dump. When I sit down to start writing, sometimes I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to write that day, and it just once I start writing, it comes to me, and I'll write until things stop coming to me. So I again, it's a plod with a D, plodding along.
So there are rules that when you teach at schools or at writers' conferences or you're a guest speaker somewhere, you have some simple rules, you call them simple, for writing. And your first one is who gives a shit. And when you say who gives a shit, initially I've seen people's faces go, I give a shit, that's who gives a shit. But it's not meant offensive, it's meant to get your brain like moving and thinking about how to develop your character or your novel, right?
True. And in saying that, it's when you write, assuming that you're writing for somebody other than yourself, then you have to figure out who cares about what you're writing about. A lot of my students in college are 19, 20, 21 years old, and I ask them what they want to write about and say, well, I've had a very interesting life. And I say, no, you haven't. You haven't lived a life. You don't have a life. You haven't lived long enough to have a life.
That's true for most students. There are exceptions to that rule, I think, but yeah, I think for the most part, people in their 20s are just now getting started, getting into their life, and there are exceptions to that rule, absolutely.
Well, of course, there's exceptions to every rule, but if you're going to write something, you want somebody to care about it,
and not just like your family. You want your family and friends. Of course, you want them to go, "Oh my God, you're such a great writer," and hopefully you are. But
most of the time they could be lying to you.
They could be lying to you. You've got to know the difference between there, and there. You, and yours, right? And you want somebody other than your family to read it. You want an audience. Who is your audience? Isn't that the big question when writing?
Of course, that's a question that you have to ask. I mean, if you're writing a murder mystery, you're not writing it for 7-year-olds. It's not a picture book.
So you're not taking it to.
So you're
not reading it to the children at the library afternoon, kindergarten class.
No.
Mr. Smith killed Mrs. Smith. So again, talking about your audience, obviously you're not writing a murder mystery geared towards 7-year-olds. You're writing a murder mystery geared towards people maybe in their 30s to 70s or older, right? And you've written a murder mystery series. You have a detective who one of your books that's set in the 50s called The Wrath of the Dixie Mafia, right?
This is true. Yeah, I have 2 mystery series in print right now. One, as you mentioned, is set in the 1950s. It's about a private investigator who works out of a pool room in Atlanta, Georgia in 1953. The other one is more contemporary, and it began as a mystery series, and it's evolved into kind of political intrigue with some mystery thrown in. But they're both basically, you would find them in the mystery section of your bookstore.
And you go ahead and show us The Wrath of the Dixie Mafia.
Yeah, the first book in that series, in this Johnny Morocco series, is Wrath of the Dixie Mafia, and there's kind of an interesting story behind that, where it came from and how it started. I was in the Army. I was on active duty. I was stationed in Los Angeles, and I was the Army liaison to the TV and film business. And one day I was driving home from work, and the name Johnny Morocco popped in my head. And I thought, who is Johnny Morocco? I'd never heard that name before. And I just kind of blew it off. And a couple of days later, I was thinking, and Johnny Morocco popped in my head again. And okay, I don't know who this is or why I keep thinking about Johnny Morocco. So after about 3 weeks of Johnny Morocco, I woke up one morning about 3 o'clock, as I sometimes do, and it said Johnny Morocco is a private investigator who works out of a pool room in Atlanta, Georgia in 1953. And one morning he went in and found a dead body on table number 7. And I thought, oh, it's that Johnny Morocco. And that's literally how this series started.
And the Dixie Mafia is a real mafia. They were pre-civil rights, correct?
Well, Dixie Mafia's been around for a long, long time, and are still around.
Yeah.
Not as big as they used to be, but they are still around. And you go back to, people talk about, write about what you know about, and I literally grew up as a child in that pool room. My dad would go there on a lot of times on Saturday. He'd take my mother to work, and I would go to the pool room with him. And while he was at the pool room, listening to ball games and maybe shooting pool and stuff, I would go to movies downtown Atlanta, and I'd go by myself, which you could do at that time. So I grew up in that pool room, and of course other pool rooms as I became a teenager. But during that time as a child, my dad was kind of on the fringes of the Dixie Mafia because he had a lot of friends who were in it. And a lot of the people who I write about from that pool room were in the Dixie Mafia.
Your characters are loosely based on people you grew up knowing and being around with Ben.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're composites of people that I knew, that I knew, and that he knew and talked about. So
Right.
they're fiction based on fact.
So the go-to is never make a author mad because you'll end up dead in their book, right?
Yes.
Yes. And now I know this series has been out for about 12 years now since you first started. Your first book you wrote like 89, and that was a long time ago. And you did that on legal paper.
Mm-hmm.
You hand wrote it on legal, like the long legal pads, and then Mom typed it out for you, and you got it into publication, and you've been going strong ever since. And I know, like, a lot of people come up to us because you're traditionally published, which means you have a publisher house and an editor and beta writers. And now we have self-published, which with platforms like Amazon has allowed a lot of readers to enjoy new authors who normally wouldn't be published because they couldn't get in the door of a publishing house. And you have some rules that you follow about how to get your manuscript in front of a publishing house. And what's the biggest one that you hear from publishing houses? They say, you send us your manuscript and us only. What is your opinion on that?
My opinion is, if you're a writer and you see a rule, break it. When you find a publisher that says, we accept your kind of novel, your genre of novel, whatever it happens to be, science fiction, mystery, romance, whatever it is, we accept your genre of novel. Send it to us, but only us. Don't send it to anybody else because we don't take simultaneous submissions. You're going to send it to them, send whatever they ask for. They may ask for the entire manuscript, they may ask for a treatment, 20 pages, whatever. Send them whatever they want, and you're going to wait for 6 months or a year for them to respond, if they actually respond. And during that time, you're going to sit there gnawing your fingernails down to your elbows, waiting for them, saying, oh, they must be going to publish my book because it's taken so long. And you may not ever hear from them. But if you find 20 publishers who accept some sort of submission from unagented novelists, send all of them whatever they ask for the same day.
Because you did that with your first novel.
Oh, absolutely.
You sent out, like 25 letters, I think it was, and it was like, Dear Mr., Westinghouse, whoever is the publisher, and you just changed it and you sent them all out, and you didn't know you weren't supposed to do that because that's against the rules. And so that's how you got your first novel published, right?
This is true. Again, I felt like I didn't want to wait for a year to hear back from somebody if they would even respond. So I sent out a ton of letters
And you did that with no agent. You had no representation.
No agent, no nothing. Just a list of publishers that
You got it from a magazine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Writers Magazine.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Now your first book, since you wrote it on paper, how long from start to finish did that book take you?
Because I didn't type it.
Well, yeah.
Your mother was typing it. It took a lot longer than a normal book would, but that was the first novel that I wrote. After that, it was a long dry spell because of Army moves and deployments and everything else before I actually started writing something else. So I started writing the Dixie novel, the Wrath of the Dixie Mafia, probably 10 years after I had my first novel published. And so for that one, I was still on active duty in the Army, and I was writing at night and lunchtime and things like that. So from the day Johnny Morocco woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning until I finished the first draft, or a draft that I felt comfortable sending to somebody, was probably 15 to 18 months.
Now you are on your fourth publishing
House.
Yeah, so I know you're on your fourth, and you've kind of moved up in publishing hierarchy. Just give me a quick rundown on how that worked for you.
Yeah, I'm on my fourth publishing house now. The first one, the publisher who wanted Dixie Mafia. I sent him the manuscript. I found his name in a writer's magazine. I sent the manuscript to him. It was a small press in North Carolina, family owned. And I got a call. It was actually on my birthday. And I got a call from him, and he said, I read your manuscript, and I really didn't like it. And I thought, well, why are you calling me to tell me that? That's kind of insulting. He said, but I read it again, and I really liked it the second time I read it, and I want to publish it. And I'd like to make a series out of it. And I said, boy, you sure drive a hard bargain, but I'll take it. So we agreed to make a series out of the Johnny Morocco mysteries. And I wrote the second book in the series and sent it to the publisher. And probably a month after I sent it in, I got a call from the editor who worked at the publishing company. She said, I have good news and bad news. The good news is we really like the second book in this series, and we like to publish it. However, the bad news is the owner of the publishing company passed away last week, and we're going out of business because it's a family-run operation, and nobody in the family wants to take it over. So now I've got a book that's been published and a manuscript ready to publish, and nobody to publish it. I'm all dressed up and got no place to go.
And a lot of people would have given up at that
Oh,
point.
yeah. But fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not a lot of people, so I started looking for another publisher, and I found one who not only accepted the second book, but republished the first one, and said, yes, we will publish your Johnny Morocco series, and we will publish your second series. So
And that's
the one. That's a contemporary series set starting in Seattle, Washington.
right. That's a Max
Maxwell, and that publisher has kind of gone downhill a little bit, which made me look for yet another publisher. So I found publisher number 3, and they agreed to continue the series. And I had another, what I wanted to be a series set in Vietnam, and it literally took 40 years for me to get the book like I wanted it. And I met a publisher at a writing conference called Sleuth Fest, put on by the Mystery Writers of America Florida chapter, which I'm a member of. I met her there, and we talked about it, and she said, that sounds like a good series. I'd like to have 3 novels in that series.
And she's your fourth editor.
She's my fourth publisher. Fourth publisher. And I've moved up each time, and I think I found a home now.
So now you're published. You're out there. You've got 23 plus novels with more on the way, and you're on your fourth publishing house. You know, you're doing great. You're doing a good job. Proud of you. do you have an agent?
To answer your question, I do not have an agent. I have a manager who handles my screenplays, but we'll talk about screenplays later. But as far as an agent, I do not have one because I'm not yet to the point where I'm at a publishing house who pays an advance.
That's a big misconception. Like okay, you've got a book, and publishing house picked it up. Now you need an agent, but that's like giving money away unless you have like a huge, I guess like a huge contract with a large agent, correct?
Well, an agent doesn't make money until you do. So if your book, if your royalty statement at the end of the year is $1,000 on your one book, then your agent would have made $100 that year, $100 or $115 that year, depending on his percentage. And they're not going to do any work for $100.
Yeah.
It's just not practical for them to do it. So unless you're bringing in some big bucks, you don't need an agent. But the other side of that is when you need an agent, it's the easiest thing in the world to find. When you get Bantam or Simon and Schuster or somebody like the big publishing company that says, we like your novel and we want to give you an advance of $50,000, then you pick up the phone, you call any agency in New York and tell them that you have a contract. They will be delighted to work for you because they don't have to do any work. They're going to get 10% of whatever that advance is and 10% of every check that you get from then on, because those checks go to the agent first. Agent gets their cut and then the agent sends you the check.
So that's for more of larger publishing houses,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
so that you get picked up, and that way that takes care of your property and your money, and that's one less thing you have to worry about, and you can continue writing.
True.
Okay, so then let's talk about festivals, because we've gone to a few book festivals. We just went to the Books on the Bay in Pensacola, Florida. We're going to one called ButcherCon later on this year. Let's talk about the one time you entered a book festival with 750 words, which is about, what, 2 or 3 pages,
3
roughly,
pages.
that you entered into a book festival. What happened with that?
I heard about a writing contest being held by a book festival called Book Fest Key West in Key West, Florida. And to enter your book in the contest, you had to send them the first 750 words. And I had a book that I had written part of the book based on a screenplay that I wrote. I wrote a screenplay about a female smoke jumper. And a smoke jumper is someone who jumps out of an airplane into a forest fire, generally up in the mountains or something that's inaccessible by tractor or roads or anything to put out the fire. And these are very dangerous jobs, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to have a female smoke jumper. So I wrote a screenplay about a female smoke jumper, and I shopped it around, and it got some interest, but I never sold it. So I thought, this is a good idea. I think I'll just write a novel about it. And I sketched out a novel. And by sketching out a novel, for me, that's almost like building a house, framing out a house, and not putting in the electrical and the plumbing and the bathroom and the hot water heater and all the things that you need to make it a livable house. And I had that novel sketched out, and I saw this ad for the festival in Key West, and I thought, I'll send them 750 words. And I sent them 750 words, and they wrote me back and they said, we really like this. Send us the rest of the novel because you're a finalist. And I thought, uh-oh. Again, I violated all my rules, and because there wasn't a rest of the novel. So I had to scurry around and finish up the novel for a book called Where There's Smoke. And if you notice in the corner, there's a little sticker that says 3rd place. Out of that 750 words, I got a publishing contract and 3rd place prize for writing a novel basically in 30 days.
So you really had to really had to push yourself at that point, right?
Yes.
Yeah. 'Cause that's not easy, and you've done that on numerous occasions. That's not your first. Here's my first chapter. Yeah, it's totally written, not a problem. You can have it by Friday, and it's not written, and you have to have it by Friday. So you've done that a lot.
It's in fact not going to be ready by Friday.
No, it's usually ready by Friday. It might not be the best, but that's what the editor comes back and says. You need to correct this, and this. You go, oh, thank you. You're such a great editor. And it's not, it's because you didn't actually have the novel completed. You had a general idea of, going from A to B to C, but you'd only started with A. And that's how you ended up in Key West as a...
Well, yes, kinda, and I had to do that with Where There's Smoke because when they said they wanted it, I thanked them for considering me for being one of the winners, but I said this is kind of rough, and I want to make sure that it's in the best possible shape that I can give it to you because I knew they would publish it. That was part of the winning, that they were going to publish it, and I wanted it to be in the best possible shape. And the best shape for me was to be finished, and it wasn't finished.
Finished, yeah.
So I had to both finish it and get it in good shape for them to publish. And I told them, I said, I'd like to take, maybe 3 weeks to a month to do this, and they allowed me to do it.
Well, it's probably a good thing they allowed you to do that. Huh? They don't have to write it in a week. What advice would you give someone who is going to write? Currently writing, in the middle of writing, trying to finish. You always have a saying where you say, I'm going to get around to it. And so now's your time to get around to it. So what advice would you give to somebody to get around to it?
The best advice is to not give somebody some advice, but to give them a little bit of guidance. I think if you break it down, if you're writing let's say a 300-page novel. You think your novel is going to be 300 pages. If you write a page a day, 250 words a day, at the end of the year, you've written 365 pages. That's more than enough for your novel. That gives you all the weekends off if you want to take them. So a page a day will get you a novel a year if that's what you want to do. But you've got to do it. You've got to sit down and do it. Nobody's going to knock on your door and say, excuse me, do you have a novel in your head? I'd like to buy it. It's got to be something you can put in their hand. You've got to be able to hand it to them.
And you have to be willing to be vulnerable at that point, too, for somebody to come back and critique your work.
Oh, as a writer, you can have no pride of authorship because somebody's going to change it. And they're going to usually change it for the better. Because that's why God made editors. The publisher hires an editor and their job is to take the book that somebody in that publishing house has said, this is a good book, but let's make it better. Let's make it a bestseller. Let's make it so that we can all keep getting paid. And here, you take this book and look at it and see what's wrong with it and what's right with it, and get with the editor, get with the writer, and make it a better book. And that's what they do.
All right, cool. And that is, I know myself from writing, that's very hard to give over, here's my baby, take it apart, and they do it. They do. And and you go through all the emotions. You're mad, and you're like, you don't know what you're talking about. My character is fantastic. And then when you go back, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I did mess that up a little bit. So like you said, you can't have pride.
Pride of authorship.
Pride will kill you every time. You will not get a book published.
Yeah, I think most writers will find that the changes that are made are for the better.
Yeah.
And you can't find your own mistakes. Right. I read I have 2 beta readers, and I send it to them, and they read it. And they'll mark it up, and they'll say, oh, you change this and change that, and you meant to say his, and you wrote him, and your spell check didn't pick it up, and your brain reads what you want it to read.
Right.
And so you can't find your own mistakes, but your editor can because they don't know where you're going with it yet. So editors make it better. and you've got to turn it over to them. If you can't do that, then don't write.
Right. I think when you were writing Smoke, you had me do some beta reading on it, and the female lead, you had her listening to a Walkman,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, nobody has Walkman anymore. You know, you had, oh, she turned up the stereo, listen to her Walkman. I'm like, and then I think I called you and I said, is this a period piece? You're like, no, it's contemporary. I'm like, no. And you're like, yeah, everybody listens to Walkman. Nope, we all have AirPods now.
Star-Lord.
Star-Lord, yeah.
It was a period writer as opposed to a period novel.
Yeah, the writer was still living in 1990.
Your writer always lives in the past.
So, good talk, good information, and we will put all of everything we've talked about. I will put down in the information below. We'll put Paul's website, where to find his books on Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes Noble, Target, Walmart, some other places. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at the email provided, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Of course, this is from our point of view, our experience. What we do works for us. It might not always work for you, and that's the beauty of learning and your novel idea. And I want to know what are you reading this month? Because you're as bad as I am. There's a book in every room, on every table. I mean, my house is stacked up with books that I'm currently reading. And there we're actually, like, we've got one of the cameras propped up on one of the books that I'm currently reading. So I want to know, who are you reading this week? I guess because I think I'm reading like 4 novels at once.
Well, my problem with what I'm reading and who I'm reading is like you. I'm a voracious reader. I read all the time, and I read so many books that I frequent a lot of used bookstores. First, to find out if they have any of my books so I can rescue them. And secondly, to find books written by authors that I like. And invariably, I'll go in and I'll see 2 or 3 books from authors that I like, and I'll buy them and I'll bring them home. And by the time I've read 5 pages, I realize I've already read this book. So I've got stacks of books that I've already read 2 or 3 times.
No, we need an app for like a book tracker or something.
Yes.
Anybody out there, if you have any good suggestions for apps that track the books you've read, send them our way, because I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, and I've got 2 books that I bought. I bought the first in the series. I've got 2 of them right now. So it would be great if anybody's got any good suggestions out there for like a book app, something you could keep track of what we're reading. So who are you reading? Because I know you've got a friend.
Yeah, right now I'm reading one of my favorite authors, James Ben, a good friend of mine, who, this is a book of short stories, but he has a World War II series that is just incredible. And I've read, I think he's got 18 or 19 books in the series, and I've read all of them. But I highly recommend him.
And what's his name again?
James Ben, James R. Ben, B-E-N-N.
Okay, and we'll put a link to his book.
Yeah, and we're going to invite him to be a guest.
Oh, cool.
He wrote a very nice cover blurb for one of my novels.
Now, a cover blurb is?
It's something that goes on the back cover saying how wonderful your book is.
Okay, the I Love Me?
Yes.
Okay, and I am currently reading Empire of the Vampire, and that's by Jay Kristoff. Highly recommend it. It's from a vampire hunter. He's the last one on his world, in his universe. He's the last vampire hunter, and he's been captured by the vampires, and they are basically getting information from his point of view, how he became the vampire hunter. And it starts with the world, the sun goes dark. And I don't want to give too much away. The vampires are in control of the world, and they have, eradicated almost all humans except for what they use as chattel, and it's told from his point of view. It's about 700 pages. It took me about 3 days to read, but I was fortunate I had some time that I could actually sit down and read. I've got book 2 coming. Highly recommend it. And Logan, our sound engineer, is not much a reader as we are, but he is a voracious gamer. And what game are we playing this month?
We're
Or what you said you were going to go back and play another game because you did not finish it.
Yeah, I've been playing Terraria, and then right now I'm going back to Dying Light.
What's Terraria for the people who don't know?
It's Minecraft, but if every mod for Minecraft came stock.
Okay, and then the other game you're playing or going to go start playing?
Dying Light.
Dying Light. And what is Dying Light? Because I know you played that. That's an older game.
It's very old, but I finished the second game, which is ironically how I play every game series. I play the newer ones for some reason, and then I play the old ones.
And Dying Light, what is that one about?
Dying Light is zombie game. If you had a guy who did parkour for his entire life.
Okay. All right, so that's the only two you're playing, right? Okay, cool. All right, well, we appreciate y'all joining us, and we